Welcome to Bridging Generations in Sales and Outreach. I'm your host, Butch Nicholson. And this is the show where there's no hype, there's no fluff. These are just where seasoned professionals sell the great ideas that work for them. So, welcome to the show today. I'm excited to have Cody Moore is my guest today. Cody and I are in the same professional group. It's the founders, Foresight Founders Group. Is that right?
Yeah, I think Foresight Founders Forum is the official name.
Forum. Yeah, and we're part of the Trustegrity Network. Shout out to Dean Nolly, who runs the group that Cody and I are in, and shout out to Kimberly and David Alexander, who do a great job of running all the groups, at least in our area. So, why I was excited about having Cody today. I've been in sales for generations. Don't want to give away how old I am. And I believe that one thing hasn't changed. Sales always comes down to know, like, and trust. Buyers want to buy from somebody that they know, like, and trust. But the way we do that has changed. When I started in sales, it was all face to face, shaking hands. And today, especially with the younger generations coming up behind me, social media really became the way that they connect. And then it really kind of hit home with COVID when people suddenly realized they don't have to pack their bag on Monday morning, fly all over the country to see people and get back on Friday night. So what we're here today to share with you, and mainly for Cody to share with you, is how that process has evolved, how it's become more social media based, and then how do you get a good blend of that? And one of the things that we're going to talk about, and Cody brought this up, we've got to meet buyers where they are, not where we wish they were. And if they want to do emails and text and don't want to have any face-to-face meetings, that doesn't matter. What matters is that doesn't matter what we want. If that's the way they want to do it, that's how we've got to do it. And that's how we've got to train ourselves to do it. So let's hop in. So Cody, you've got kind of an interesting way you got to where you are today. So give us our audience a quick rundown of that journey.
Yeah. So thanks, Butch, for having me on. I appreciate the time and the kind words in your intro. So the way I got into my role here with the wealth management firm that I'm a partner at now and doing financial planning was a little bit of a roundabout process. So I was originally connected with the founder of our firm here years ago, getting my degree in finance, and did a little bit of work with the firm, small projects, stuff like that. Coming out of school, ended up going more into the IT world, IT sales and software sales, and getting some experience there. Knew it was a booming industry, and getting a degree in the financial world, I knew it was kind of a gap I had to learn about that industry and get some experience there. So I actually went into that world for a handful of years, worked for some IT companies and software companies doing that. And then the software company that I left, this would have been about 6-7 years ago. I actually reached out to Darren, who's the founder of our firm here. We got reconnected, and kind of the rest is history from there. Went out and decided to make the pivot into this industry. And I know we'll get into some of this a little bit later on probably, but realized throughout the sales career, so to say, that I loved getting to be client facing and work with people, and meet their goals and their needs and build those long-term relationships. But in the world I was in, was certainly, in B2B sales in the technology world, much more of a transactional type of relationship. And so I learned throughout that process that I enjoyed the relationship building and, helping people reach their goals and helping them, along the path. And so pivoting, back into my kind of original place that I started into the financial world, and getting to work with people, and realistically in our industry now, if you've got if you're doing a good job for them, hopefully that relationship is a 20 plus year relationship. And so being able to build those long-term relationships and help walk alongside people as they're going through their life and their families, and retirement and things like that, really fit in what I learned I enjoyed to do along that route.
Uh, so, by the way, Cody and I weren't able to be in the same place today, but we are both having coffee, and I guess we're having a
Um,
virtual across the table. Uh, so, Cody, when you were talking, two things popped into my mind. One, or the first, and you can address this, but when you were in the technology space, that is a very transactional sale. I mean, it's almost, what do you have, how much does it cost, and how fast we can get it, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, on the other side of what you're doing today, uh, other than their family, you were talking about the most important thing to everybody, or a great percentage of the people. You're talking about their money, and that's
mhm.
important, and very non-transactional. So, going to speak into the difference of those two.
Yeah, so in the technology world, it was very much, you really needed to just sell your product or your service, whatever it was, whether or not somebody necessarily needed it or not. You had a quota to hit, and you had to hit it, and you had to do a certain amount of transactions, and then start every year over back at square one. You weren't really building anything, or building a foundation, in that space. And so back then, this is 10 years ago, I was able to do a lot of deals over just conference calls, never seeing, been never really putting a face to the name. Maybe you'd fly out and meet somebody in person, but for the vast majority of what you needed, or the type of deals that you worked on, a lot of things were just done over phone calls, and you were getting transactions done. And honestly, um, you know what I sold was, very much commodity. A lot of times it was, price competition necessarily than value, or anything I specifically brought to the table with my own skill set, other than, I guess you could say, people skills. And so shifting over into the financial world was a big change, really. I mean, the years ago, maybe you could have been successful in the industry by, cold calling 100 people a day and slowly chipping away and building a book, but just a much different type of sale, so to say. So, as opposed to selling somebody a transaction and being, maybe the most competitive on price, it's much more about, credibility, trust, and then of course your skill set and your service level, and what you're able to do for a client. So a much, you could say maybe a slower sales cycle, but also just a much different type of interaction and sales process, so to say. There's a lot more of trust building and credibility building that you have to do. And then ultimately you have to, prove that you are good enough at what you do. Your team is good enough at what they do for somebody to trust you with, one of the most, some, maybe the most important thing, the most important asset that they have is, their life savings. And so it's a much different relationship that you have to build with people. And it's much more fulfilling, at least, to me, and what I enjoy, to be able to go about it that way, and not necessarily just be a commodity out there, and trying to make a quick transaction, but being able to hopefully build something that lasts and that sustains, and that you're able to provide a high enough level of service to somebody to where you're working with them on their most personal asset for hopefully a very long time.
Yeah. So, Cody, one thing you said when we were talking about you being on the show, uh, I think you said something to the effect that when you were in the technology side, that the way you had to sell then was, I think the word you used was soul sucking.
Yeah, that was that was certainly a term that I would use, referring to that part of my career. One of the last job I had in the software space, my job was to, kind of, well, was outside sales. So it was to be the hunter, so to say, the cold intro person to try to, reach out to people, generate the interest, and then, build enough trust with their leadership of their company that, they would bring on your software and really take on a huge change to their corporation. So you did have to, had to build a lot of trust in that scenario to be able to have leadership of a company make a significant change like that. But in that role, the second a deal was done, I was to pass it off to a transition team, to a long-term account manager to manage the relationships and to manage, the with the leadership of that company. And then, my job was to move on to the next deal. And so, just that grind, consistently starting over back at zero, and really building those relationships and building that trust with the leadership team, then immediately passing them on to somebody else, and not necessarily severing the relationship, but on the back end, that's what we were supposed to really do, to be focused more on new business, all the time, constantly. So pretty, to me and my personality, and at least what I enjoy, it was a very, very soul sucking experience to me. It was much more fulfilling with what I get to do now, where I do get to build that trust, build that relationship, with folks. And then I get to regularly, meet with them, continue to build on that relationship. And, now that I've been doing this for a number of years, getting to see them achieve the goals that we, started planning for, 3, 5, 7 years ago.
Oh, for sure. So, so Cody, one thing you and I agreed on when we were talking uh, was in today's environment, if you're in sales and really whatever you're doing, you're probably selling something at the end of the day. But if you're in sales, you've got to meet. This is a pet peeve of mine. You got to meet people where they are, not where you wish they were.
Hmm.
Uh, and where it really becomes complicated is when you're dealing with generations. I'm a I found out recently I'm not a baby boomer anymore. I'm Gen Jones. Uh, I would guess what are you, Gen X or are you millennial?
I believe I'm millennial.
Okay, so Gen Jones deal with people different than a millennial would deal with them. Doesn't make either one of them right or wrong, but what it does mean is if you're the millennial trying to sell me, you've got to know how I buy.
Mhm.
If I'm the Jen Jones selling the millennial, I have to know how the millennial buys. Uh, so speaking to that, because I would imagine people get really serious about most people get really serious about their finances the first
Mhm.
time when they're a little older, and then there's sometime, and like you said, that I mean that's the most important thing because there are a lot of decisions you have to make when you hit retirement age that are directly affected by how much money you have.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so differences in communication and generations are, something that you've got to be aware of and you've got to adjust to, and like you said, meet the buyer where they are versus having one line of communication or one style or one avenue that you hold steady to for everybody. I've got clients from their 30s all the way up into their 80s. And so there's definitely a difference between what, a 70 or 80-year-old who's into retirement years and how they want to be communicated with, and what makes them really feel comfortable and safe and know they're being taken care of, versus somebody who's in their 30s. I've got clients in their 30s who I've never met, who are in different states, and we've just done everything over Zoom. And I can say, not as necessarily a blanket statement, but majority of clients that I have in their, 70s plus, or, really even probably 50s on, want to meet in person. And I, if I had it my way, would prefer to meet in person, at least initially, to build that relationship. Come into our office, meet all of our team. We meet in person, and then especially going over, complex scenarios and planning scenarios and retirement analysis. I find it easier just to go through those things together in an in-person environment where we can, you can read body language, you can tell based on somebody's body language, whether or not they're grasping the concept, or whether you need to describe something more, or whether they are getting it, and you can kind of speed up the process, is just an aspect that you've got to really be tied into to try to effectively communicate. And so with younger clients, I have found that a lot of them just want to meet over Zoom, and they're comfortable with it, and they're totally fine not meeting in person and having that same process and relationship. And typically later generations are not going to want that. They're going to want to meet in person, even if it's for small things. Some nowadays, with everything electronic, most clients are getting digital paperwork, DocuSign, things like that. There's still some folks that want to be able to have a physical piece of paper, sign things physically, and you've got to be able to adjust and adapt to that as well. One thing that we've done over, I believe we started about 5 years ago, is we started putting out what we call our weekly market minute videos. And that's been a big hit with clients over the years. And what we do is, based on how attention spans are nowadays, we do a weekly video that's about 1 to 2 minutes tops, is what we try to keep it under. And it's just a quick update on what's going on in the markets. Or last year they had the big beautiful bill come out, and so we did a few videos each week on different highlights from that were really relevant to our clients for their financial planning. The war in Iran, what's going on there, oil and gas prices, things like that. So just not always something that's super time sensitive that week. Sometimes it's maybe more just updates on portfolios and adjustments we're making. And then what's really helpful is when we have, last year when we had volatility in April and a drawdown in the market because of tariffs and what's going on there, it's nice to have a regular recurring outreach from us to clients to help reassure them, let them know, we're on top of things, and also let them know, especially for folks that are more interested on specifics in what we're doing and what we forecast, and having that regular weekly update. So that's been a big hit. But I've had some clients that have said, weekly videos are great, but I'd prefer just to have a newsletter, just so, text and an email with an update on what's going on. I don't really want to watch a video. And so you've got to take multiple different avenues to be able to reach different clients. Some folks want to read a long-winded email. There's a lot of our clients who would never even open a long-winded email because they're going to see how many paragraphs it is, and then they're going to go ahead and just mark it as read and move on. And I found, at least between the generations, those weekly market minute videos have been a hit and been something that everybody's enjoyed for the most part. But there are some that's not how they want to receive information. There's some clients, like I said, that just want to meet over Zoom, and they just want to talk on the phone, once a quarter, just check in on things. And then there's others that want to have a sit down formal meeting once a quarter. And so, you've really got to, when you have that personal, the way our industry works and working with people's personal finances and working with their families and their households, you've really got to figure out, okay, how does this person want to be communicated with? What's most effective for them? And then you've got to really meet them where they are to make sure, they're satisfied and they feel like they are being taken care of. And, ultimately whatever makes them happy, makes them feel, heard and seen, to be able to have that really long-term relationship with.
Yeah, it's interesting. And while you were talking, it just made me think. I have a good friend who is in the real estate business. He's in a really particular niche of the real estate business, and he sells real estate that he's never seen to people he's never met, and the people that he's never met have never seen the real estate either. Which
Yeah, that's
25,
a
30 years
specific
ago would
niche
have,
for sure.
yeah, and then 25, 30 years ago, I mean, you would have never thought somebody buy something without seeing it. So, Cody, as we
Mhm.
wrap up here, let me ask you two questions. First question: what would Cody today tell Cody 10 years ago?
Mm. Well, I would say all the changes in technology, communication, with virtual meetings, now with AI, note takers, all these different things, to make sure that you are changing and adapting with the times and with technological advancement. That's been a big thing that has taken effect throughout my career, starting off with cold calls and phone calls and conference calls now to where, have full relationships with people over Zoom, and, AI and note taking and things like that are in the mix. So I think that's really important, and really important today too, for somebody that's maybe starting out their career, or maybe making a change, or just trying to figure out, maybe they're more resistant of AI and things like that are coming out now. I think, especially for everybody, really, especially for business owners, for folks, maybe midway through their career, and especially for, kids coming out of college and trying to start their career. I think, you know, taking advantage of artificial intelligence and all the advancements and things are changing so rapidly. I think it's really important to stay on top of those things to really have a competitive advantage over, your peer group. And I would say that that's something that's really important to just stay on top of. If I was looking back 10 years ago to tell myself, continue to change and adapt with the times and take advantage of all the new things that are coming out, and try to learn and adapt to things faster than all your peers.
That's good. So the last question, uh, do you have a life rule that you just absolutely will not break? And I'll give you
Mm.
two examples. Uh, one person, when I asked one person that, her answer was always do the next right thing. Another example asked the same question, and the answer I got was never eat sushi that comes from a gas station. So, somewhere between those two, what's a life rule you never break for yourself?
So I don't know if I've never broken it for myself, but I try to always challenge myself to never break it. It's something that I, try to share with my kids and stuff like that for their future as well. As if you ever come across an opportunity that makes you nervous or makes you excited but a little scared, intimidated, I always like to go straight for it. If it's a speaking engagement in a room
Okay.
that's, intimidates you and makes you nervous, maybe it's 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever it is. I think I think you should. And I try to force myself to take all those opportunities. I had a situation where this was back in the technology world. There was a gentleman who worked for a different company that was kind of had some notoriety in the industry, was really, really successful. And I thought, there's got to be a way. I got to be able to meet this guy and just pick his brain. And so I found out from a peer that knew him that he went to this coffee shop, Tuesday mornings every week, and did a Bible study or whatever it was. And so I just actually showed up to the wrong coffee shop one week. It was the wrong Starbucks. It was a different Starbucks. And so just showed up there and just ambushed the poor guy, and tried to force a friendship on him, and was able to become a friend, and a bit of a mentor. And I especially, I've had some opportunities to do speaking engagements at conferences and things like that. And whenever something like that comes up, where the first initial reaction is a little bit of nervousness or anxiety, or fear, something that's just outside of your comfort zone, I think it's really important to leap at that thing. And I think life is lived right outside your comfort zone. And so that's kind of a rule I at least, I don't know that I've always been perfect at it, but I try to follow, and
That's
definitely try to
that's great
take in
advice.
part.
I would say that most people that are really, really successful and happy at one point had to do that. They had to get out
Yeah.
of their comfort zone. Well, Cody, appreciate you being on the show today. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so really the best way to get in touch is reach out on our website. Got plenty of information there on my firm and what we do. Got contact info there, and then our office line, if you'd like to reach out directly, is 678-739-0175.
Great. Uh, if you need to if you need to reach out to me, probably the best way is just a direct message on LinkedIn, or you're free to shoot me an email, and you can find that address on LinkedIn also. So, Cody, really appreciate you being here today. For the audience, thank you for listening. Like I did say, this show is there's no fluff on this show. This is sharing ideas with successful professionals who are doing the right things. And Cody definitely falls into that category. So thank you very much, Cody. And with that, we'll be here next week, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and